Coming up, as we come out of the All-Star break for the Brooklyn Nets, we pose the question, can a broken tank agenda still lead to success for Sean Marks and the Nets? We dive in, coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. But thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Go check out FanDuel today. And Doug, as we know, All-Star break not going to feature a ton of Brooklyn Nets, although Cam Johnson, three-point shooting competition, all the vibes of Joe Harris from years past. But we thought about what it means to be coming out of this All-Star break and trying to look at what clearly is a failed tank agenda and whether or not this team can still be successful, whether or not fans should be a little more relaxed on how this particular season unfolds relative to the long-term plan.
Yeah, just before that, too, I went over to our friends on FanDuel and got a little cheddar down on Cam Johnson. Well, logged in at plus 900. They saw me coming. It was plus 750 by the time I got the. I said, we'll go with the odds. Didn't matter. Enjoy the money, friends at FanDuel. Help and support the podcast. Yeah, so it's funny about this because we're in the All-Star break and we have a wide view of the season now. And have a wide view of the season compared to where we thought the season was going to go, right? If you walk us back to like beginning of October, where we're, I'm ferociously betting the under on the win total. And we're thinking like, there's just no way this team's going to compete. Like it's just going to be easy to get into these top three picks in a season where you have Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and maybe some other guys here, where there's going to be like the floor is going to be so high on projectable NBA talent coming out of this draft. And you're feeling okay about like the prospects of, if you're a certain fan, you're feeling okay about the prospects of like, yeah, maybe grinding through, a 15-67 season, right? Or like even like a 20-62 season where it's like, okay, that's a lot of losses, but the light at the end of this tunnel is the promise that we will have, I never hate to say it, the Nets will have increased their chances. I hate when people do that. So I was pissed off. I just did it. The Nets will have increased their chances at being able to land sort of one of these generational talents. And that's sort of the name of the game in the NBA. And now we, fast forward February 16th, the Nets are 7th in lottery odds. There's almost no chance they're going to hit this bottom three at this point. And I don't know if it's like copium among a certain member, a certain group of the fan base, or like sort of maybe like a gross misunderstanding of sort of what the goals are here, or I'm just misunderstanding it and the goals here are different and the Nets have a different plan. But I think it's right to be confused. If you're a fan, I think it's okay to be confused about what's happened this season. And I want to be careful about like, you can be happy that it looks like they have a great coach. And you can be happy that they play hard, and you can be happy that it looks like this is an organization that like has guys that want to get out there and get after it and be dogs every single night. And it's also okay to be like, well, when we trade Bridges, I did it again. When the Nets trade Bridges and reset everything, this kind of was the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes that you wanted to be all in on, and that's just not where the Nets are right now. So long story long, like I think it's okay to just be looking at this book from both ways and be like, what's going on?
Well, see that part of it, I think you touched on something there. It's like the one thing every fan, anyone looking at the Brooklyn Nets this year should be reasonably is confused because the breadcrumb trail all led you to everyone collectively saying, "Oh, okay, now they made the trade with McHale, they got the picks back, they make the extra move with Houston. Okay, now we get it. Now we have control of our picks, and that means tank this year, and away we go." Now, you could simply say that the start of the season in particular, because I know like we're always looking at the most recent games, right? 6 out of the last 7 and saying, oh, well, now it's when they blew it. Now it's when they blew it, right? You keep moving the finish line of when they really screwed it up. It could be as simple as they came out, they won some games early in the season because Jordi Fernandez really came in with his hair on fire, so to speak. And it ended up messing things up immediately. The odd part for me would probably be up until Sean Marks, last month said we're going to be strategic, which is really when it started, I think, to shine a spotlight. And a segment of the fan base went, okay, you've now confirmed that we're going to be strategic about minutes and how we play guys, because we know it's not always going to be about on-court results relative to what we want to accomplish. Prior to that, you could make the case that we all followed the breadcrumbs and said it all leads to a tanking season this year. But nobody ever came out and gave the indication of that from the Nets' perspective. Like Sean Marks didn't come out and say, so clearly we know now we're going to be strategic in the summer. He came out and said that as you worked your way through the year. It still ends up being the same result. But there is the part of me that thinks we all assumed, because it looks so obvious from the outside, that that's what the plan was. But was it? Was that always what Sean Marks assumed was going to happen coming into the year? When he hired Jordi Fernandez and he walks into the office and says, I'm taking these guys out there. We're going to compete. We're going to build back that beautiful word culture in this organization. And Sean Marks said, great, go for it. And we're not going to prevent you early in the year from doing everything you can to win basketball games. They may have just miscalculated on what time do you pull the cord, right? When do you sacrifice certain players or make certain decisions? That could be the simple answer here. But I do think that it's possible that the Nets did not walk into this season saying, we're 100% going to tank, because you can look at other teams like the Washington Wizards and go, oh, yeah, they knew exactly how they were approaching this year from day one. Right, wrong, and different. There may have been a multi-path forward for Brooklyn, which we've seen in previous seasons with Jose and with Sean Marks at the top of this organization.
Yeah, I would add one more thing to this. I think that they also misjudged, because I actually think that in some ways they've done sort of the tanking thing. They've run out a roster that's really just not like NBA. It just doesn't have the talent that a lot of NBA teams do. I think they just estimated sort of how much Jordy would get everyone to buy in on a certain system, how hard the guys would play. And I got to tell you one thing, they've been massively couches and unlucky or lucky, wherever you want it to be. If you go to ESPN's, their RPI rankings, which have expected win-loss, on a Pythagorean record. So the Nets are, so this is basically where you are compared to where you should be, effectively based on how many points you scored and everything else, right? In the aggregate. So the Nets right now are 20-34. This is wild. But their expected win-loss is 15-39. So they're five games over expected win-loss. And I got to tell you right now, this really doesn't have, you can get to this level, but they've been so lucky on the win side. Yeah. Because basically they've won a bunch of close games. A bunch of games they've won, they've been close. And then they've just gotten smoked in some other games. But to be 5 games above your expected win-loss, somehow Washington below their 9 wins. It's expected win-loss is 17-7 and 47. Unbelievable. They're total. They stink. But so anyway, it's one of these things where it's well, of course, if you're the Nets fan out there that's been wanting to see a few more losses, just with the caveat of being the losses mean better chances at getting these generational talents that the fan base can root for the next 10 years. Believe me, you'd want to root for a guy like Cooper Flag for 10 years. I'm just telling you right now, right? It's very obvious. And so to look at it and be oh, wow, there actually been 5 games on the lucky side where the Nets fans have just been through multiple seasons of, the unluckiest total garbage scenarios that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years. It's been unbelievably unluckily, even on a world pandemic level, to be unlucky, to spike bad luck around the one guy who doesn't want to do this, the thing or whatever, all this stuff. And now it's oh, well, now this is the season we get lucky with the wins. Yeah. This is the year we're 5 wins above. It's just it's kind of unbelievable.
Well, and that's the part of it here. Coming up in a second, there's a couple of things here because we've talked about winning 6 out of their last 7, talked about where the defense has been. But I can automatically shoot that down pretty quickly with a couple of numbers relative to who they've been playing against in those games. And you can also, of course, take a look at the other question being posed by fans. Tell me when the tank works. Well, Doug Norrie's going to right after the break.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, you got this ongoing problem. You just don't have time. It's work. You got life. You got trying to eat healthier, constantly feeling stressed out. You go to the grocery store. You buy things you just don't even need, end up with no time to actually cook. Sticking to health goals, that's going to be a struggle as well. Everything changes when you discover Hungry Root. It's been a game changer. Easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress with Hungry Root. It's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. Take care of the grocery shopping, recommended meals, groceries based on taste, health goals, anti-inflammatory, high protein, gluten-free options. There you go, Adam. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. Quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, delivered straight to your door. Huge time saver, and you're going to eat healthy. You're going to love going to Hungry Root. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life, your whole life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the post-All-Star break landscape, we're going to have episodes coming up here with the Cam Thomas of all of this, because that's actually, I think, something that's going to be fascinating, regardless of what the numbers have been and accidentally winning games and all this stuff. If you bring in the thing that the Nets desperately need, which is offense, then I think it changes this conversation even to another level with expectations. Now, I want to get to this tank team who succeeds scenario with Doug, because he's not happy with a big segment of the fan base. But the other thing I just want to point out here is when you go over,
I love the fan base, by the way. You stop it. I love the Nets fan base. Even the ones that push back.
Well, no, those are Doug's words, not mine. That's just the way he talked about some of you. I love every one of you. But when we look back at this, we were talking about how the Nets have been the defensive efficiency and how well they've played over this recent stretch of games. But if you go over and look at, so in the 6 out of 7, right? Well, actually, it's the last 10 games they talk about, right? So it includes Phoenix as well, which you'd say that's a good team. The Kings, okay, they're state of flux, but Suns, Heat, Kings, Hornets, Houston twice, Washington, the Heat again, the Hornets again, and then Philadelphia. Well, over the last 10 games, when you look at the offensive and defensive efficiency, yes, Brooklyn is absolutely crushing it on the defensive efficiency. Guess the teams that are among the worst in offensive efficiency over the last 10 games. Charlotte is a league worst. Miami is among the worst. Houston is 24th, among the worst. Even the Suns are on the wrong side of being offensively efficient in terms of where this median breaks out. So are the Kings. Obviously, the Wizards in there as well. So, we talk about this team is playing well under Jorge Fernandez. They are having success. And when I said over the next 15 games, so I said 2 games ago, so they've already gotten a couple of wins. When I said talk to me in 15 games, where I set the over-under win total at 5.5, that was why. Because when you go and look at the opponents, you have not been playing teams that have been playing well. There's the bad teams, and then even the teams that when the eye test, you go, Kevin Durant, got to be good, right? No, that team's been weird this year. They were even contemplating maybe trading him at the deadline. So they've kind of run hot, especially on the defensive end, against teams that have been running really cold on offense. So that part of it is something I wanted to point out here before we get into tank conversation.
Defense has been sick. The defense has been sick. Best in the league. Like over the last, and fine. They've had some other, they played some easier teams, but like just, I know it doesn't matter, still NBA teams to spike, a 10-game stretch where you're the best defense in the league. Worst offense in the league, by the way. This is where this expected win-loss thing is hilarious, because it's like they've been like one of the worst offenses, but they've been the best defense. And usually that still ends up in losses, but like, but here we are. It's just like it's a hilarious turn of events.
And by the way, too, like, and coming up here, so you'll get some clarity on it, like from the defensive rating standpoint, how they've played. Like Portland is actually still a fairly well-rated offensive team over these last 10 games. Philadelphia's on the right side of it. They're going to play the Clippers in there. Golden State. There's a couple of teams here that as you go forward in the next 10 games or so, you'll get a real sample size. OKC, one of the most efficient teams offensively over these last 10 games, right? So you're going to get a good sample against some really good offensive teams where you'll say, hey, and by the way, even if they play marginally well against them, you're still going to chalk those up to wins. But in terms of actual win-loss column, I think it's going to be a different story. One other thing, if we can push, I want to save your ire for as long as we can so that you kind of pop your top at a certain point. Can we also just touch on, I said this the other day, and I was curious if we sit here and they have They have 28 games left to play on the season. I know I said this the other day, but I wanted to set a concrete number. If I put the over under at 36.5 wins, making it acceptable to realize that while we came in thinking tank, this season actually has more value. And I'm not getting in the weeds about wanting Cooper Flag and all that stuff. but just that this team, this organization is better positioned than maybe we thought coming into the year. If you can be a team like that, if Jordi Fernandez gets this team to 37 wins, I do think we have to reframe the way we talk about where this team is, what they can do over the next couple of years with the draft picks and with the cap space relative to assuming this was going to be a 15-16 win season and they were going to be a total disaster and need to build this thing up from the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I mean, but like to what end? Like what's the next thing? Because okay, let's say they even get to that point, which would be
by the way, so talking about going 18 and 17 and 11 or 18 and 10.
Fine, they do.
They're going to do. Right?
Okay, then what? Then what? Well, then what? Like that's my next question is then what? Like, okay, we've already shown pretty mathematically, let's say, that they're like 5 games above where they should be with their win thing. So they'd already be like on the complete lucky and luck box side of numbers here if they got to that point. So they'd already be running hot. And then for what? Like, what's the next move? They're not going to be better than that. And so,
and this would be and this would be talking about, and now you go get Giannis in the offseason, right? Like that would be, I guess this would be the portion of fan base that would say you go right back into pursuing players, right? As opposed to what we perceived it to be, the strip down for the picks to build it up with young talent, right? Like, and I'm not saying
they'd be better for sure. They'd be better, and maybe that's a win, and maybe that's 3 seasons of Giannis while he's still got gas in the tank, and you have this team, and maybe that's good enough to be like to appease a fan base, and maybe that's good enough to pack Barclays and get to the 4th seed in the East or something like that. I don't know. Like that's fine. I would root for every win. I just don't think that's not sustainable practice. I don't think that's like a long-term build. That would feel like a cool short-term thing to happen. And like, I just don't, it's all for what? For what? And again, maybe the for what is 3 seasons of 4 seasons, if we're really pushing it out, of really fun basketball, and we're having great conversations, and they're thinking about one more move. Are they one more move away? I mean, that would be, I'd probably sign up for it. I would not think it was a good long-term strategy, but I would say I would for sure rather watch that than the current version. So that's a no-brainer. Like if we're talking about that, what would I rather watch? I mean, obviously I'd rather watch that. It's like, I mean, it's like silly to even presume otherwise. Short of that, it would have to be something like that, because otherwise, look, maybe I'm seeing this wrong. Maybe it's like, oh, maybe that's not the point of sports. Maybe the point of sports is just to win the games and don't worry about where you are with the stuff. And I should just be out there rooting. Like, don't worry about where the lottery odds are. It's a silly way to root for sports. I get it. We hate it. We said this. How many podcasts have we said that the system sucks? I hate rooting for this stuff, or I hate even thinking about it. But yeah, maybe that's good enough. Maybe that's just the goal. I don't know.
No, and that's why I find it interesting. And I think the one other thing that I would put into that bucket too is we all talk about, rightfully so, you've blown the opportunity to have the highest possible chance to get Cooper Flagg, right? Okay, or Ace Bailey, right? Or Dylan Harper. Like you've hurt your odds to get it. You may still end up there, but it would be lucky against the grain of what you've done this season to yourself. The other thing is, even though we know it's different, we know where the top talent is seen in the draft, especially near these generational groups. The Nets have 4 first-round picks this year. They have 3 in 2027. I do wonder about times when we maybe overlook the fact that a team that has had no first-round picks primarily, or very late first-round picks, right? The ability for this organization to maybe go get a superstar talent and use these other, you're going to have 3, you could have 3 or 4 first-round talents on your roster. We're all talking about how they've blown the top of the tank odds. They could still pick 8th. They could still pick 9th. And that's not going to be Cooper Flagg. And it's not going to be amazing. But it's still going to be a really good player. And then 3 more really good players. And I do think, rightfully, being obsessed with the best chance to land the best player has fogged a little bit the fact that you are going to be bringing in a ton of really good young talent. The percentage chance that they're going to hit and be really great players, yes, that is great. That is reduced as you move through the first round. But also, this organization has never been in this position in the last, ever in their franchise history, where they've had this many first-round picks, and on paper, they're going to make those picks. On paper, they're going to refill their roster, not with flyer guys from years past, with legitimate talent that fits their system and fits what Jordi Fernandez's vision might be for this team as well. I think that part is something just worth noting here as we wind down the conversation about the tank. Now, coming up in a second, though, I'm going to let Doug go off a little bit here. People that say, name a team where the tanks worked out for them. He'll name some. Name a team where the agenda of just making sure you lose as much as possible to reset your franchise. Show me the path. Doug's about to do that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. The game tips off, NBA action just getting started. No better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Look, with FanDuel, you're placing live bets throughout the game. Maybe you miss opening tip and get in there in the fourth quarter comeback, stay in the action, and you want a bigger payout. Combine those live bets with the same game parlay. I was over there with 3-point contest the other night. Cam Johnson, nope. Buddy Hield, nope. That's okay. Love using FanDuel. FanDuel's live betting feature. There you go. And the settings keeps every moment of the game exciting. Maybe you're like you said, you get in there late action with the Nets. If you bet on the Nets here, by the way, with this thing all year, I mean, like we told you, but there's so many wins above it. It's a money printing factory on FanDuel right now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, time to put a little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode. Doug's opportunity to take the stage here. We'll touch back on what I was speaking to about having all these picks and everything else. But there is certainly a big voicing around, like, we'll prove that it works. Prove that tanking and being bad gets you there. It seems like people sometimes forget some very recent examples in history for the NBA where, of course, it works. And it works out, as well, if not sometimes better.
Yeah, so this is where like the goalpost situation on the tanking piece is like very difficult to keep your sanity around when you're talking about it because the goalposts move all the time here. One is if the goalpost is the NBA championship, which is the ultimate goal, then you could actually make any case. Everyone's always gonna be right. 97% of the teams don't win the championship every year. So like 97, right out of the gate, 97% of the time, you're going to be right with your argument if it doesn't involve the championship because 3%, 1 out of 30, 3.3% of the teams win every year. So it's like, that one is an impossible almost hurdle to clear, which is why I hate starting there because you're just always right. You'll just be right. If your goal is a championship, if you haven't been LeBron or Steph or a few other guys, like you've been right about your strategy. Go ahead.
No. And I was going to relate it back to before, as you were saying, and maybe you're wrong about it. Maybe we bat these things around because it's not like we have some unwavering conviction. When you mentioned about, say, oh, you go get Giannis, you go, okay, well, it's competitive basketball for a few years. Maybe you're a 4th seed, right? You go, it's not a championship. Like that would be the easy response from you to me if I pose that. You go, are you going to win a championship? Then it's not the best possible path, right?
Right.
And now there's this version of it. Yeah.
When you start there, it's like it becomes very, very difficult, right? And by the math, like you can't, like there's 90 again. This is why most sports people feel like their takes are right because 97% of the time their team loses at the end of the year, right. And the loss is what proves whatever thing they thought was wrong about the thing, right? So it's like everyone gets proven right with their takes every time. So we have to try to back that out a little bit. So if you were from there, if you're saying to yourself, what are the ways to win? The ways to win the championship. So like not winning the championship, the ways to win. The ways to win a championship, which we've seen in this one goes every year, is you have to have at least one of the top 10 best players in the game. You have to. Usually it's even higher. Like you have to have like something like one of the top 5 best players in the game in any given year. So the goal should not be to think about in whether tanking works in the under the lens of does the team win the championship. Okay. The lens should be how is it that I can acquire the players? How can I best get my best chance to acquire the players that will fit the criteria to make it to the championship? Right. So now we're expanding the player pool significantly into not 97% of the time, right? On a year-to-year basis. And so when you look at through that lens, the idea, where those players come from, by and large, they come at the top of the draft. If you look at if we just go by all NBA teams, if you look at like all the top 50 players in the game in any given year, by and large, the closer you get to the top, the players come in the high draft. Yes, I know that Jokic was drafted in the 2nd round, and I know Giannis was taking in the 14th or whatever, and I know Shea was taking. I know there are examples of this, and I get that part of it, but those pieces become increasingly rare as you look at the scatter plot. If you scatter plot, which I did, by the way, because I'm psychotic and did not spend time with my kids and made had ChatGPT make me scatter plots of where all NBA players are relative to draft position. And it's just very clear. It's like very top of the draft. Now, the other piece of this is if you're saying, so where does tanking work? I would say tanking worked for the Spurs. They got Victor Wembanyama. Okay. It made sense. They had a bad record and they got one of the best players in the game. I would say it worked for the Magic with Paolo Banchero. I would say it worked. I had this right in front of me. Let me just get this. I had the list right in front of me here. Hold on one second. Of course, I would say, I'd say jury out here, but it's looking a lot better on Cade Cunningham, right? Like with the Pistons, like he might make an All-NBA team this year. We would say it worked pretty well for the Wolves with Anthony Edwards, right? Like got to within a series of the championship. The Zion thing, he was an obvious pick that year. Peak Zion, you're in that discussion. You just can't, like, he hasn't been able to pull it all together. DeAndre Ayton, probably not, although that team did make the finals.
Right. Like, even though maybe you say, fail, but you still say there was a point when it did work out.
These are just the first picks, by the way. I'm not even going to the second and third picks, right? Like
Paolo Banchero as well, right?
These are just the first picks. Like, forget, like, Chet, I think the OKC is happy with that, right? Mm-hmm. Where they were able to get top pick. Like Markelle Fultz, like, no, that didn't work, but we all know that Jason Tatum was drafted right behind that year based on the Nets tanking. Now, they didn't mean to tank, but the Nets did tank, and they got Jason Tatum out of it. Karl Anthony Towns has made All-NBA team twice. I guess my point is Andrew Wiggins, no, but he won a championship. So it's like Anthony Davis, like these teams that were bad and got the number one pick, you take all these guys in your team right now. Like if it was the Nets right now, Wemby, Paolo, Cade, Edwards, Zion, for years they would have easily. Ayton probably not, right? Like even Simmons, go back to Simmons, he made All-NBA team once, and Nets fans could kind of tell themselves a story. My point is that the question isn't whether or not tanking works. The question is whether tanking works to acquire the very best talent in the draft. That is proven. It's proven. Like, it's like I just read you the list. I just read you the list of some of the best players in the game, and then forget about the LeBrons of the world, right? Who went number one overall, generational talent, like all these guys. And one more piece of this, and we're going to end up going long. You waited too long on this, buddy. I knew I was going to just start cooking here. Yeah. If you think,
my apologies.
The other way to look at this is think to yourself, how much better of a chance does Cooper Flagg have to be against any other player in the draft to make it like very much worth it to try to get a player like him, right? Sure. Now, let's say, because someone posed this to me on Twitter the other day, they said, what would you bet is him against the field? Like 5 years from now, who's the best player? Cooper Flagg against the whole field of the draft. I was like, probably 20% Cooper, 80% draft, or 80% rest of the field, right? Like, it just doesn't always work out that the player is the best in the draft. Even at 2080, because then he was like, well, then you have an 80% chance of like getting the next best player. I'm like, that's true if the Nets pick the next 29 picks. Like they have an 89
pool of everyone else.
Yeah, the 2080 rule works in this case. If the Nets get the next 29 picks, yeah, I would take the next 29 picks instead of Cooper Flagg.
This isn't betting on golf and taking the field over Tiger Woods, because I'll take
exactly.
Else.
I can't bet it like this. They get one or two or three of these picks. So like you don't do it that way. So when you remove that and you just say against any other player on a 2080 rule, even back to like 10 to 90, right? 10 to 90 gets a little lower. I ran the math on this. Like he has a 3 times better chance of being the best player than any other individual player in the draft. Right. So now you're talking about like a 3 to 4, I'm rounding down, by the way, 3 to 4 times better chance than any other individual player in the draft. And if I lost you, then sorry, but like, this is just the math. The math is very clear, pretty clear on this, on very loose, with very loose bounds on like reasonability around players. And especially when you talk about generational talent, this is why the tank does work. The tank works when you're trying to acquire the best talent. That's the goal. The goal is to acquire the best talent. 97% of the time, you'll win on your championship argument. Congratulations. Yeah. Go buy eggs with it. But what I'm saying is, like, right now, the goal is to get the best players. And I just read you the list. This is how you get them. You get them by picking at the top of the draft. Anyway, that's it.
Also, I'm doing this for the sake of putting it out there. It's also by just going and signing the best players, right? Like that. That's the other. Right?
There's another version of this. Yeah. Yes. By the way, if you're playing, that's why I go back to the top of what you said. Okay, you go on a top 5 player in Giannis and you can get him. That's the other goal. That's fine. That's fine. I would say to that your ability to do that is not precluded by your ability to also get Cooper Flagg. The great thing about the NBA is you can do both.
By the way, the right way, the universe, this is 100%. The right way to do it is tank based on the construct, as we all understand, tank to have the best chances to get the first overall pick, to have the best player, and then also go sign a former elite talent, blah 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 blah, in Giannis and whoever.
These
and
aren't mutually exclusive events. You don't get the.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, you get the pick first. Well, now you don't get a chance to trade for the guy. Like, that's not how it works. These aren't mutually exclusive. Like, or they are mutually. I always get this wrong. Anyway, there's some level of
not mutually exclusive. You can
that,
do
like,
both things, right? And by the way, I think that's part of this conversation, because we like to bat around this stuff. And the one thing that we don't pump our chest out about it, but I saw this from you the other day when someone was battling you with it, and the question was like, well, what if this happens? You go, great, then I'll change my opinion on it. Like, always. I will always change my mind based on information, based on data, based on results. Like, yes, I will be informed by it. These things that happen right now, there's two silos of you have to go get Giannis or you have to tank and get a pick. Like, no, they don't have to live by themselves. There are 9,000 overlapping versions of it. There are the best versions of it. And funnily enough, I'll leave it with this, because when you were talking about these past first overall picks and what that's looked like, there is also this other part. I'm sure there were the other generational drafts when we go back here through the years. But when you get down to, so this is, the funny part about, you'll still get a good player. If you're in the top 10, you're in the lottery somewhere. We don't know where the Nets are going to land. But when you go and start naming the players in like the 7 to 10 range in the top 10 year over year, there's a lot more misses there. Like, and that's just, we know that's going to be the case, but there are just a lot more good players, not great players, not generational players, right? So that sliding scale really does move quickly. And I think even sometimes when we say generational draft this year and even next year too, that can be true, but it does get less. Totally. Generational talent doesn't last all the way to 20. We're talking about, instead of maybe just one guy, there could be 3 guys, right? Instead of just 2, there could be 4 guys, not, there's probably 16 guys that'll be cornerstone pieces for every single franchise. No, that's not the way it goes, right?
The math is super clear. The math is super clear. It's like, again, if the Nets get all the picks after a certain point, I would take that, because it's like, oh, you have so many, maybe close, but like, that's just not how it works. Everyone puts it through the wrong. Not everyone. Many people put this through the wrong lens of assuming that because a few outliers happened in other cases. Believe me, it doesn't work this way. Like, there's many more. Like, for every Jokic that gets drafted at 42 overall, every other 42nd pick is out of the NBA and sucks. Okay, so that's the actual number. I want to say one more thing too. Sure. This was when you said about changing opinions, right? Yeah. I'm happy to change my opinion with new information. I've done this many times with almost everything in my life, frankly, like financial, political, like economical. The only reasonable
way to go through life is to be willing
family
to
stuff,
based on
family stuff, education, almost everything, every idea.
You swapped out your strong ideas, and children multiple times, right? Because you got informed by things. So this is like 5th wife, right? And I think 8th kid.
Strong ideas loosely held, right? Like, is the way to go, right? It's like, be prepared to make a case strongly for something, but if presented with new compelling information, be prepared to change, because that's just the way the world works. I'm happy to do that. And by the way, just tweet me. I'll give you all the examples of the things. I won't do it now. I've done this in my life. Almost everything that opinions I held strongly, I've been able to change on. Where it falls down for me, and people I think I'm a dick. Maybe, I don't know. Is that, like, it's like, well, if we have differing opinions, I do not value opinions that have no basis. Like, that's not an opinion. An opinion that has very little basis in either historical or like mathematical facts is not an opinion. It's just a bad idea. So that's where I stop. I'm like, where the people, where if you want to push back on, things where there's just not real, like good, strong analytics to back it up, and it's like just maybe a few loose stories of like something that's happened. Those aren't opinions. It's a bad idea. So Adam's making a face because he probably thinks I'm being mean here, but like I
was drifting, as Doug is sometimes on the podcast. Just assume that I heard everything you just said. No, I was drifting off a little bit. No, and I do agree with you, and I think that that's a part of always these discussions. And I think that probably the downfall for some people that have a good opinion, like the opinion can end up being not right, but it can be valid. But you can't just rest on, I think this is a good opinion. That's not enough, right? Like, I have good thoughts. Great. But then what did you do beyond that to prove that there's validity to it, right? And whether it's the analytics, whether it's the history of this or that, whether it's your vision of what you think a franchise could be if they do X, Y, and Z. If you can present all of that, fine. And I can say, like, I wouldn't do it. I would go the other way. I would trust the numbers on this, right? But you can't show, or you can, but I think it's bad. I think it's bad form to show up and say, I disagree, and have someone say, great, why? And go, because I just don't think it. And by the way, when
to provide the 97% excuse that I outlined at the top.
Right. Exactly. Say,
100%. Well, okay, right. Great. You win. Yeah. Enjoy it. Enjoy your Sunday. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. I knew this was gonna go long.
Right. This is the beauty of sports. It's like sometimes it's just about that gut feeling in your belly, and it goes in spite of all the information presented. It could be, I think it's gonna work out. I think we're gonna be okay.
Well, you want to know one of my, buddy, you know my trigger points. Just show up in my mentions with stuff like this, and it'll be absolutely game on for the whole day. And we'll put all the rest of life aside. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Leave a comment. Tell me what a nice guy I am, or tell me what a jerk I am. I'm not really sure. Adam's always a nice guy, so you're only going to show up and say he's a nice guy. I'm prepared. I'm prepared to hear both sides. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen.
A mathematician is a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat which isn't there, and that is Charles Darwin.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow. Talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.